If you are new to our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener with your host Joey and Holly Baird, and special in-studio guest, host of the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki on Chicago Smart Talk, 1590 AM. Mike Novak and Peggy Malecki.
People go out to their gardens all the time and they see problems and they don't know really what the problem is, and they try to describe it to people like us and Mike and some of our sponsors who do this for a living, and it's just not enough information. You have to provide some type of image or more description. I'll reference Luke from MI Gardener. He had a comment the other day, and he said, I'm not answering it because it said, my plants are dying. What do you think it is?
Right. There's just way...
You have to help yourself.
Right. There's way too many variables there. And sometimes I'll get people that send me messages on Facebook, and this is what's going on with my plants. So what is it? And it's like, yeah, you need more information. So one thing is that...
Oh, and we do have great people who listen to us and email us and send photographs and be very descriptive. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what it looks... I can help you then. I can do that. But what we got a number of problems that we faced and we're facing in our garden, and we're going to cover some of those right now.
Right. So what did you want to go for?
Well, let's go with the early, the tomato blossom end rot on tomatoes.
So this is going to be happening now because we're starting to get tomatoes, or hopefully soon. And so what that is, it's a lack of calcium in your soil,
or lack that the tomato can't pick up the calcium that's already in your soil because of the lack of water that you're providing for it or nature's giving it.
So what happens is that if you're not watering properly, you're not giving your garden enough water, that calcium gets locked up into your soil and it's not being released into the plants, and that's what causes that blossom end rot. The good news is that it's not a permanent thing. So what would happen is on the next fruiting, as long as you keep properly watering, it should be gone.
You can actually save a tomato that's gotten blossom end rot. Just cut off that part of it.
Yeah, we've done that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And we used to say this, and we've made mistakes, and I'm sure, Mike, maybe you've made one or two in your life.
No.
Okay. That's why we have you on the show. That we would say add Epsom salt to the soil, and this would prevent this from happening. But what occurs is, we talked about in the first segment, Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate helps green the plants up. Well, then we tell people add 2 tablespoons of Epsom salt to 1 gallon of water, and you'll fix your problem. Well, it fixes the problem because you're watering the tomato plant, allowing the calcium that's in the soil to be unlocked for the plant to pick up.
Exactly. That's exactly what you're doing.
So save your Epsom salt and use it for your feed at the end of the day, and just keep your plants watered.
It's really an interesting problem, and you guys mentioned both of it. It's technically, it's a calcium uptake problem, but as you say, Holly, it's solved by proper watering. So you really, the average gardener should not get visions of calcium in their heads. What they should get is regular watering techniques in their heads. That's what they need to do.
That's exactly it, is to be properly watering and making sure that you've built yourself kind of on a schedule or a rotation, and mentally
Monday, Wednesday, Friday,
and let me say something. Given that it's raining today, but this is interesting. And I think here in Milwaukee, in Chicago, it's been a very wet early summer. Except for the last few days, suddenly it got very dry. And Peggy, you were saying you have areas of cracked ground in your yard.
My mud turned to cracked. Hardpan clay.
And this is blossom end rot waiting to happen, basically. You get used to all this water, and I think gardeners get the idea that, well, we had a lot of water in May, so why am I worrying about it? It goes away very fast.
My grandfather's 82 years old, and he said in the summer you're 10 days away from a drought at any time.
That's really good advice, yes.
And that's why you need to make sure even if you're not watering because it rained, you're in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, I've thought about watering my plants
These are your children.
Right.
And I would imagine container plants
I'm not going to feed my baby
today.
He'll be okay.
Yeah, in containers you have to water more frequently because of that evaporation.
Especially as we're moving into mid-July, early August, because the days are getting hotter and more evaporation.
And I turned the irrigation system on last night knowing we were going to get rain today just to try to prime the soil to absorb more water.
So it doesn't run off.
So it doesn't run off.
So as Mike had mentioned, even though we've had this rain, and Joey made a good point there, we still have to be vigilant and mindful about what the future could be in regards to no rain.
Well, let's talk about another tomato problem, which is early blight, which a lot of people don't know what it is. They just say, I've got a discoloring on the lower leaves of my plant, and it's progressively working up the plant, and by the end of the season, I've got a plant with fruit and stalk and no leaves because they're all dead. That's early blight, and if we catch it early enough, we can fix it. Well, first of all, what is early blight, Holly? What is how does it happen?
Sure. So there's good and bad things in your soil. One of them is early blight. So what happens is that blight splashes up onto the leaves of your tomato plant, and then it starts to kind of just progress, work its way up, and that's what occurs there. So there's a few different things that you can do. One would be to trim the bottom leaves of your tomato plants at the time of planting, throughout the season, at any point where you see some yellowing. And once your plant is established, you can trim up to 25% of it away, and that's not a problem.
6 to 8 inches from the soil level up the stalk, leave the stalk bare, and anything in the canopy that's hanging down that the potential splash up of soil can attach itself to, we want to remove that as well.
Folks really hate to do that, okay? I will say right now, if you got lush leaves and they're near the bottom, and I clean up, move up the stalk, and I clean those leaves off, but you look at those beautiful, healthy green leaves, and you say, I don't want to take that off. It's adding energy to the plant, but you need to be aware of that fungal spores can splash up from the ground and get on those leaves, and it's going to infect your plants.
And the more you trim off, the more stimulation you will cause the plant to produce more leaves, especially through the sucker aspect of it and the joints. They'll put more leaves on it. You can also mulch to prevent that soil.
You can mulch. Mulch is good for your whole entire garden, definitely around your tomatoes, because I think they're a little bit more sensitive.
And as you're trimming, you can put a handful of whole grain yellow cornmeal around the base that has a beneficial bacteria in it called trichoderma.
Fungi.
Yes, fungi.
What do you guys like to use for mulch around tomatoes?
We use leaves. If we're out of leaves, we use chemical-free, seed-free grass clippings. And straw also is a good third alternative to that. We put 2,000 pounds of leaves in our garden this year. The garden you'll see this afternoon, it's hard to find any leaves at all because they've all broke down.
Of course, yeah.
In the soil.
You know, that's one of the things in the spring when folks are cleaning up their garden. I scratch my head because there's food for your soil right there, and folks say, well, it's messy now, and I say, you know what? Once the weather gets warm, that's going to disappear so fast you won't even remember that it was there.
Right, and I have, and you've probably done this. You're doing a container, and you're picking out all the little stuff to make the soil all lush and clean. Yeah, so we want to leave that in the soil.
Exactly.
You're supposed to pull that out?
Whole grain cornmeal, yellow whole grain cornmeal. You can use that, and then you can put mulch on top of that. But we're wanting to prevent soil splash up on the leaves. 90% of the problems your tomato plant's going to face is problems that soil has attached itself to the leaves.
So why don't we talk real quick about that tomato leaf curl?
Okay. And you brought this to our attention, Mike,
right.
the tomato leaf curl.
Yeah.
And you talked about it on your show.
Yeah.
So can you give the symptoms of what you were seeing or still are seeing and what you were able to find out, and I was able to find some information on it?
Basically, several weeks ago, we noticed that the leaves, top leaves, generally it was the newer leaves on the tomato plants, had started to curl. They did not discolor. They're still green. There was no discoloration on the rest of the plants, so we're not talking about early blight or late blight or some of those other problems. And the leaves just curled, and sometimes the problem went away, and sometimes it didn't. Now, I had it in my yard. Peggy had it in her yard. She's in Highland Park. I'm in Chicago, so that's completely different. We've had other people with the same problem, and we've been trying to diagnose it. Now, I had a friend of mine write to me and said, I think it's pesticide drift. I said, yeah, but it's the same problem Peggy's having in a different part of...
If you were neighbors, you could say, okay,
right.
You
could
possible.
say
right. Same with people I know in Lake Forest.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not close.
And in my neighborhood, I don't think anybody uses that stuff because there's not a lot of lawn, so it's not 2,4-D, and it's not. I don't know anybody using Roundup even in the near area. It would have to be something like 2,4-D because that can spread for miles.
Right.
You can have drift from that and not even know that somebody's applying it a mile away. I get that. I'd be surprised if it was that. Now, some of the plants have recovered, and others still have the curl. For instance, I have a Cherokee Purple tomato that still has curled leaves. And what are your tomatoes that have the problem, Peggy?
Berkeley tie-dye green.
Okay.
Any of the potato leaves are perfectly fine. It didn't do anything to them.
So we think, from doing a little research, and we're still not exactly sure what the problem is, but considering that some of the plants have recovered, we think it's heat and water related somehow. Mainly heat,
because the plant continues to grow and everything's fine.
Yeah.
Just
yes,
the
we're
color.
still getting blossoms. We're still getting fruit produced. It's just
The
that
leaves
the
haven't
leaves are
turned a lighter
curled,
green or
right?
anything.
And they have not turned color. They're not dropping off. And I'm kind of shrugging and saying, "Okay, I'll roll with it for now," but I'm still not exactly sure what the problem is.
Well, that's just some of the tomato problems that you're facing in our gardens, and hopefully that will help some of you that have problems in your garden. Thank you for checking out the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener radio show. For more, go to the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for full-length in-studio video and podcast replay of Season 1. Season 2 underway and added weekly. Tweet us at TWVG Show or hashtag TWVG to be part of the program.